Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today for the Zoom Q&A, where we're looking at lesson 7, and we're going to review that and look at any of the questions you might have regarding that. So without further ado, I will probably share my screen here, and we'll just review the lesson coming up. I'll show you a few examples, and then we can certainly look at any questions anybody might have. Okay. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with this page, and we are looking at local ecological survey as the first part of the assignment, and then we are looking at the site cross-section. And you can see up here, there's definitely a distinct difference in between the amount of marks graded or potentially allocated for each of these. So the local ecological survey, I think, is pretty straightforward. We're just asking for a biological food chain and different birds that are there, some of um, the name of the climax community, which actually that can be a little bit tricky for some folks, depending on where your location is. And then, of course, we want to look at different species in the food web, and we want to know what pioneer plants are in your ecosystem. And that's actually a really valuable piece of information to have, knowing what these pioneer plants are. And as you travel around, or let's say you're doing a design for somebody else in the future, and you spot these plants on their property, that really does give you a good idea that about the succession of the soils. And we're not going to get too far into that with this course, but basically when land is disturbed, it will have okay, well, let's say we logged an area and ripped all the stumps out, or even if we didn't, you can imagine there's tremendous disturbance to the ground when all that process happens. So that forest we'll assume was, well, it doesn't even matter if it's evergreen or coniferous. It was very fungal in nature, so that was the predominant type of organisms that were in the ground. So the microorganisms in forests tend to be fungal dominant, and that's what trees need in order to basically extract or be provided the nutrients that they need, because believe it or not, the soil organisms are completely responsible for cycling nutrients within the landscape. So if you don't have those present, your efforts are going to be somewhat inhibited. So in other words, if you severely disturbed an area and then you went in to replant trees, you might find that they aren't performing as you would expect. So I won't go too far down that path. But that's sort of a little bit of a snapshot of the ecological survey, and there's a couple of examples here that are in that module section. They just show some of the work that a few students have done. And do bear in mind that the template has been modified slightly, so you may see some inconsistencies there. And that's largely because these would have been from students in previous classes. So again, this is an example of the food chain, and this is a coastal Douglas fir forest. So that is their basically their biome. And There's some nice pictures here of some bird species and lots of interesting information about those. And then here we get into a little bit about the succession that I touched on. And this is just really helpful to know as you go forward, because there will be times when you look at areas, if it's not on your own property, it might be a client, and what is growing there will actually tell you a lot about the conditions of the soil, whether they're compacted, whether they're fairly recently disturbed. Obviously, if we're getting some small trees developing here, you know that the succession is well underway. So this is a really interesting item to dial into. And in this part of the exercise, we're just asking what these stages, what are found on your site. So in all likelihood, you don't have a climax forest and an older growth forest, but you may have these other items. So going from stage 1 right through to stage 4 here. So that's a very useful thing to look at. There's the food web. There's one example of how this person has put that together. And again, this is a really important part, is the pioneer plant. So if an area gets disturbed, or even where I live, we had to take down a huge arbutus tree when we first moved here. So that would have been 25 years ago. And we were looking at the area just the other day and amazed at the pioneer plants that had started right afterwards and what's developed over the last couple of decades. So we're seeing lots of alder. We're now seeing quite a bit of big leaf maple, Acer macrophyllum. And it's very interesting to see Douglas fir as a pioneer plant. That's something that prior to the course I would never have considered, but in fact it is. And that's, I guess, plays well into, how well it adapts to the forestry sector. So they can come in and cut and replant, and it's pretty adaptive. And again, here's some shrub material. So this is a very interesting, important part of the exercise. And then here's a little bit of info from this person that a coastal western hemlock is the area that they were in. And that actually might be debatable because I don't think, that this is the range of hemlock in British Columbia, but certainly where I live, there's, I don't see any hemlock. It's too dry for them. And then we have our SWOT analysis, and then of course, any questions there. So that is a little bit of a snapshot. Oh, wrong tab. Little snapshot of the local ecological survey. And I think most people find that pretty straightforward. And again, it's worth 4 points, but the tough part of the exercise here is the site cross section. So that that could be a little bit trickier for most people. There are some really good instructions here how to achieve that, and how to apply it to your site. And within the template itself, we'll go there right now, there's actually, it's set up very well to help everybody out with that. There's some good graphics already in place. Just try and get there. There we go. So there is a couple of sheets to begin with, but this is what we're after. Not exactly this, of course, but this sort of look where you're basically placing a slice in the landscape and showing what is at the slice and behind it. Okay. And fairly easy what we're trying to do here. We're placing a line on your base plan, and we're going to put an A on one side of the line and a B on the other. And then when we take a look at this cross section, we can then relate to exactly the position of the viewer based on that line. Because of course you could be on either side of the line, and these letters take the mystery out of it. Another thing we want to do is try and maintain a 1-to-1 ratio with your scale. So what that means is we want the same scale along the horizontal portion of the drawing as we have on this vertical. Now that works in most cases. If you're on 1,000 acres, that might not work too well. Your page would have to be either very large, or you would see very little vertical when you went to draw that. So there are exceptions to this, but in this exercise, we want to try and do that. And if you were on a large property, to sort of circumnavigate this little challenge, you would just make that section line shorter, right? Not necessarily go across the whole property. You may just shorten it up a little bit. But there's no doubt this is a little bit tricky to do. Let's take a look at an example here. So, and these examples aren't going to be perfect, and I'll certainly point out what is imperfect about them. In this drawing, we have a cross-section line, our property boundary. That's great, that's labeled, but what we want is an A and a B placed on here. And it doesn't matter which side they are, but why that's critical is when we go look at this, we have a very good idea of the orientation, because otherwise, it would take me a little bit of time to figure out, okay, there's houses down there or dwellings. So, okay, this is the top of that line. So that's something you definitely want to do. And that way, if if somebody didn't have any knowledge about your site, they would be, very quick and, be very quick for them to figure out the orientation here. So the first thing you would do is draw the slope or your finished grade, and then start adding elements here and designating the height, which they've done here, right? So this is kind of a hyphenated, so Douglas fir, 14.5 meter. There's a nice little image added. So it's nice to add images. That's a great idea. As well, there is a greenhouse and a shed and the height there, as well as the house and some other trees here, and even a pond. So of course the base of the pond is shown. And then you have your succession stage, where these points are in their succession, as well as the microclimates. So it's a pretty, how would we say? There's a lot of information in one page just by glimpsing at this. So that is very interesting. On this page, there's some sun angles shown. And of course, as you can see, that does tell us a lot about the winter sun level and where there might be shade, and the summer solstice. Not sure what this is all about. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about the cross section. I'll show you one that I did years ago, slightly different, because of course it had nothing to do with the class. This is one I did on a commercial site that we were designing. So we had a 3D model of the property. It's about 5 acres. And then our section line went right up the road here. So it showed the city or regional district we were working with, how the landscape would look if we were to cut a line down there. So now I'm lucky the software does all this, right? If I had to do this by hand, yikes, it would, it would take a while, but it can be done. And we'll just go back. There we go. Okay. So that's a little bit about the cross section. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything. I think it's pretty clear here, buildings, trees, anything relevant. And of course it's from the cut backwards. You're not worrying about anything in front of the cut. And having some labels is a good idea, even though the drawing I showed you had absolutely no labels, right? But again, it's a different application. And the microclimates. So they're asking for the microclimate in each part, but there's no mention here of the succession. So, I wouldn't worry about that. And again, just as with all of the assignments, I would definitely look at the rubric and take a look at what's being asked for. And you can see here, microclimate is listed, succession isn't, so you don't have to worry about that. But again, this is what I reference when grading papers. So if you weren't to include some of these, you wouldn't get full marks for that. And here on the resource tab, there's a few interesting things like how to measure a tree. That can be very interesting. If you've got big trees around you, how to find a section view on Google Earth. And that's pretty easy. There's a quick tutorial here about that. Yeah, I think that covers the site cross-section pretty well. Does anybody have any questions about either one of those at this time? No, seems pretty straightforward. Let me just take a look. And I don't see any questions on the Q&A document. That's great. Okay, well, we have some time that we can plunge into anything you like. Is there anything anybody wishes to chat about, or, even if you have questions about upcoming assignments or something that's come up in the past, even anything unrelated? I'm all yours for 35 minutes.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
So we're starting to sheet mulch our land, and so I remember you made a comment about maybe not using feather meal for like speeding it up, and I was like, I didn't really provide good rationale for it like on the PowerPoint, but the reason that we were going to do it was so that like the area underneath the cardboard like heats up and kills a lot of the weed seeds. So we wanted it to be pretty hot. But also one of my friends who's kind of also experienced in permaculture has been talking about how maybe just having cardboard to smother it will be enough, because all the plants that are there are going to be, nitrogen rich anyways. And so once they decompose, they'll be whatever. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that?
And your question is what I think about placing feather meal underneath the cardboard, or yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any definitive right or wrong. There's so many options and approaches one could take. What's your objective with the sheet mulching? Just to remove or reduce the existing vegetation? Yeah. And what's your plans after that for that area, let's say?
So parts of it are going to have like a sort of perennial zone. We're trying to be kind of like light on our planning for this so far, because I mean, obviously we haven't actually created a design yet. So it's like, we're kind of just we have general zones and we have plans for those zones where like the place with the food forest will have less, we were thinking it would probably have less feather meal or less nitrogen rich stuff than like the zone where we're going to plant annuals this year. And so, yeah, the other thing too is like so we've been getting chip drops and we have like just, a ton of chips. So we were planning on doing like 6 inches of chips on top of cardboard. And I just know that's like a ton of carbon for the entire ecosystem. So I don't know. It feels like it should have some like a way to break it down, especially considering we're doing it in spring and it's like, or well, yeah, we're not going to have very much rain for a lot longer.
Right.
So like my climate's still like Mediterranean. So, it's going to be hot soon and it's not going to be nearly as prone to decomposing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, I don't do a lot of sheet mulching personally. When I want to remove vegetation, I tend to lean towards tarping and then removal. But I don't, again, there's not a right or wrong. If you have cardboard and you're on it, that's great. The only thing, I don't think it's necessary to heat or add nitrogen below the cardboard, but I mean, you can try that. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything, I wouldn't think. It will probably take a while for that feather meal to really kind of activate, if you want to call it. 6 inches of wood chips, that's a great idea. Like you could put that around established tree and shrub areas, but if you're going into areas where you want to replant, I would, I'd be cautious about that, using that amount, because you're going to have to cut through the cardboard and plant and then sort of, dish down to the whatever plant you have. So if you do have some perennials there, there's going to be a big difference in elevation there you'll have to consider. Wood chips are fantastic. They have so many uses in the landscape. They will persist, like a 6-inch layer will persist a long time. It could be, it could be a decade, right? So that is something you want to think about a little bit. Again, around trees and shrubs, it shouldn't be any issue, but I would probably go a little thinner where you think you're going to have some more herbaceous perennials, if that's indeed what you're going to do there. And then I wouldn't use them anywhere you're going to put annuals, and that's just personal preference. I really like wood chip pathways in annual gardens, but certainly not on the soil surface itself. It gets really difficult to manage with that on the soil. But those are sort of, different approaches. I would, if you can, I would try and get some manure or some compost or something else in there, like try and add a little bit of diversity, But from what I remember, Alice, your site's pretty large, so that might be, it'd be tricky to get that kind of volume in there potentially.
Oh yeah, we were specifically doing, so there's like a specific part of the site that we have access to for right now, and it's like 0.2 acres or so. So yeah, it's a little bit less overall. So yeah, but that's good to keep in mind though. We also have like, I also saved a bunch of leaves that were going to get tossed otherwise. And so
Now that very valuable.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Might use
kind?
that in animals. Oh, it was just mixed.
Ah,
There's like oaks and sweet gums and
mhm.
maples and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Those are the most
So
trees that are nearby.
yeah, the leaf mold, which is what basically composted leaves are, they are fantastic. And you'll probably find the oak persists quite a while, and then the big leaf maple and the sweet gum are a lot quicker to decompose. But yeah, that's a very valuable item to have for sure. And when I worked in the Vancouver park system, we basically used that for 95% of all the mulching that went on there. Really good around perennial plants, and you can work it into annual production if you had to. But yeah, sounds like you're busy cleaning the slate, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of we removed a lot of blackberries and did a lot of like those, you know, really tenacious herbaceous perennials. So yeah, or I guess that's not even an herbaceous perennial, that's a woody perennial at that point. But you know,
Yeah, yeah, blackberries tricky. It could take a couple of years to get rid of. Do you have any other invasives other than that, or is that the main one?
there was also this I always screw the I think it's cranesbill geranium,
Mm-hmm.
which is everywhere, and I didn't notice it until we did the the survey and everything. There was cranesbill geranium. The mint has been pretty um, tenacious, I guess. Yeah, I feel like there's some others. But yeah, I think those are our main ones really.
Yeah,
So
the sheet mulching should deal with 99% of what you have there if that's what you're trying to get rid of. Of course, the blackberry, you got to take it out manually first. Things like, say, morning glory or bindweed, if you had that, sheet mulching will, slow it, but it won't take it out. That's where, a silage tarp is handy. That's we have some morning glory on our property, and this week we're putting I guess it's a 30 by 100-foot silage tarp out and leave it down for 3 or 4 months probably, and see what we can do with that. But yes, the invasives like to come in where we make disturbance and don't manage properly. So
yeah, definitely have been noticing that. I made a trip to what I would say is like a zone 5 area recently, and actually I just found like the climax community for the area too, which is like cedar and maple. And it's amazing how few invasives there are in that area. I even found nettle, which is like, to my understanding, was totally wiped out by most people, like park systems and stuff. So yeah,
yeah,
pretty impressive.
yeah, I'm probably one of the few people that plant nettle in my garden, which I have. Uh, it's
Nice.
a fantastic plant.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. Although you don't want it next to your patio, um, it's got such high medicinal value that it's silly not to have it or have it close where you can go forage. Um, yeah. So hopefully that answered your question, Alice. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask anything today? Oh, Carly.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you a quick question more about the bindweed.
Mm,
In my garden that I have here at my house, I, the bindweed is horrible. And it's actually my garden is up against my neighbor's fence,
mm,
and it's slightly raised. I kind of leveled out our yard. So my garden is like 3 feet deep on the back and about a foot deep on the front. And so the bindweed is coming in off of their chain link fence and going up underneath my garden and coming up 3 feet along the back. And
yeah.
um, about every 2 or 3 years, I go in there and I dig all the way down to the bottom and clear out as much as I can. Is there something that I can do? Because I have about 1.5 feet between where my retaining wall for my back side of my garden is and where their fence is.
Mhm.
And I can go over into their yard. That's not a problem at all. But I need to control that stuff. And it is horrible.
Yeah. Well, it's probably, well, it ranks right up there as one of the most difficult plants to manage. And even if you say put fabric down, you could put some landscape fabric down, but in that strip, yeah, it wouldn't stop it. It's going to keep going under.
Doesn't.
They
Yeah.
seem to put on massive underground growth during the winter months. And they'll all of a sudden come up somewhere new, and they're constantly moving. So where
I
they
mean,
were 1 year, they'll be, you know, several feet somewhere else the next year.
it's like playing gardening whack-a-mole. I
Yeah.
just
So the bed that you have on that's say at the ground level of your at the top of your retaining wall, is that full of shrubs or
well,
trees, or what do you have there?
it's just my annual vegetable garden. I usually
Ah,
plant beans on that back wall. It's actually it's perfect for the morning glory because I've got a trellis along that back wall. Um, and it turns into a green wall by the middle of summer. Um, and what I've been doing is I put down my soaker hose through everywhere where I want to plant, and then we lay garden fabric down over the top of that.
mhm.
And then I also do a full layer, big thick layer of straw just to insulate the ground. And that way I don't have to water very often. I water like twice a week for like 15, 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, and it keeps the plants really nice and moist underneath all those layers, and it keeps the bindweed down, but the bindweed will wiggle its way through and find the hole that I've cut for a plant and come on up, and I have to get in there and pull it out. But typically beans, cucumbers, and cucamelons, other climbing stuff typically goes against that back wall. But it's just all summer long, it's just a constant battle. I get out there on my hands and knees, and anytime I see the little head popping up through the holes or along the very edges, I just try to pull it, but it just gets out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one because if it's coming in from your neighbor's property, you could almost, there's strategies you could do to eliminate it on your side, but it's just going to keep coming in. Unless, you could put down a root barrier, right? I don't know if you've seen those before.
No.
I can, we'll just Google that for you. We've used them before. Not for that purpose. All right, I will just share screen here briefly. Yeah, so one of the manufacturers is NDS. They do all sorts of things, and they have these root barriers. And basically, let's see if you can see a little bit more about this one. So here they have 12-inch, 18-inch, and 24-inch in height. So in this example, they want to keep tree roots from impacting a driveway. So you would excavate down and place that material up against, I don't think you need to worry about the gravel edge here, but you would try and get a straight cut and place that up against the offending area and then backfill it. And then you're not going to get anything coming through there. It is very effective. Now, could it go below it? Yep. Could it go
Yeah,
above
that's what
it?
I
Yep. But this might buy you a little bit of time. I think you could even get them wider, like wider than 24-inch.
okay.
We've used them before, for this purpose, where we're trying to reduce the impact of a tree root system in for a hard surface.
So when doing that with a tree, how is that going to affect the tree's growth?
Well, this is a little bit of an extreme example because there's two curbs, or there's a parking and a curb here. In the example I'm talking about, we just basically were putting a barrier on one side of the tree to protect us a walkway that we knew would get heaved over time, and a brand new pathway we're putting in. So the tree was just going to deflect off of it, and then it would have lots of space going in the other direction. You know what I mean? Here, this is a typical urban, things they try and do, which is a bit nutty in my mind, where they try and get trees to grow in tiny spaces, like street trees. As nice as they are, really, that's a stretch to have a tree happily growing around impervious surfaces. But I'm digressing here. This product is something you could look at, right? So that is, it depends on how long a run you were going to do. And how deep you could dig. You're saying that's 3 foot down, so it may be possible to put 2 of these, right? And have them overlap in a way that you're not going to get it coming in. It would like a roof shingle, you know what I mean? So I'm sure they make them a little bit wider, but that would be one idea. And so if you had a barrier there, and there was any way you could take that garden out of production for a year. I know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm working with a 1/4 acre here.
Right. So that's
and
hard.
It's really hard. That's like my main canning production for I can all of my stuff that comes out of there.
Sure, I get it.
So it makes
that's no.
Unfortunately, that's my garden.
So what I might suggest is, if you had some sort of a barrier that was giving you some level of insurance that you're not going to have anything new coming in that year, and because it's annual vegetables, that's one way we've gotten rid of morning glory, is we turn the area into an annual vegetable garden, and then disturbance is pretty easy. It's easy to access, right?
Yeah,
when you get
I usually really try not. It's a no dig, no till, no dig.
Yes.
And that's why I try to limit it to maybe every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
To get in there, because I just, I've worked so hard at creating a really, really good soil system. I fought with it for years, before I really started learning and researching, and just, dumping fertilizers on it and making it as good as it can be. And then I realized that, this is stupid. I'm wasting money on fertilizer when I'm cutting down and throwing out all my annual vegetables at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Just put them back on the soil and cover it up for the winter. And since I started doing that 4 years ago, it's been the best soil that I could ever have imagined. We never have to put fertilizer out there anymore. And the life is just insane. I've 1 square foot, I'll count 30 or 40 worms, in 1 cubic foot, if not more. So
we've had similar results using no-till, and I agree. It's a remarkable transformation of soil organisms below the ground. But in your case, you may have to, like, let's say you had a barrier, there's no more incoming, and you're no-till, but when you see once a week, let's say you go through there and you see something come up, you'd take a small digging fork and you just try and get what you can out of it. And then just completely, you basically have to be extremely vigilant consistently through the whole growing season, even when you get into late August, September, and it's no fun
Yeah.
weeding. And then you're going to make some headway. But
Okay.
you'll probably find you'll have to reach a point where it's acceptable versus completely eliminated. You probably won't completely eliminate it, but you'll get it to a point where it's just a sprig here and a sprig there. Chickens have helped us out quite a bit with that. We've had chickens on part of our, but we have more space on our property where we've left them in an area that was quite bad with morning glory. We've left them there a whole year, and they've just, as you know, they have huge impact on the ground.
Yeah, they do.
And the morning glory was not allowed to do much, but it still was there. So then we went in after and did a little bit of manual removal, and we've actually planted the area now. And there's still a few little sprigs here and there, and we're just going through and forking them out as they come. It's just being really consistent, because if you keep eliminating the top growth, you're going to get reduction in that root energy, because it stores so much energy. And the other thing you can try doing is get yourself, I'll try and get the recipe from you, but I took a course from Jude Hobbs on hedgerows recently, and she talked about an organic herbicide that she's had some success with. And it's basically like agricultural vinegar, a little bit of soap, and there's some salt in there too, a small amount of salt. And one of her suggestions was, let's say you're going and just pulling the tops of morning glory. Let's say you let it get 6 inches or a foot high, and you go and you pull. And of course, it always breaks right below ground. And where it breaks, and that's open top, where there's some open surface, you give it a little spray.
Okay.
So boom, and then in theory, that is translocating into the root. And there has been some positive response from using that method. And that would work really well with annual veggies, because that you're in a good spot that way. If you had an established tree and shrub border and you have that infested, they're like, good luck. That's going to be very, 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 very hard, because they're going to intertwine in all of those roots. And oh my gosh, it'll take you years of diligence. Whereas because it's an annual vegetable plot, you're able to go after it really aggressively if you need to. So, because as you know, digging it up doesn't do anything. It's a temporary setback, but
it buys me a year or two, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's disheartening too. It can be, at this time of year, it starts emerging, and it can be a very scary thing on a larger property, especially. So yeah, I hope that helped.
Yeah, it does a lot. As far as the vinegar goes, is there a difference between agricultural vinegar and what I can buy in the store?
Yeah, it tends to be stronger.
Percentage wise?
Let me just see here. There was a product I used to get. Trying to remember the name of it, but it was a certified organic herbicide. Eco Clear, I think that's what it was called.
I'd be really interested in that recipe.
Yeah, I'll find
it.
I will.
Thank you.
This is a product I've used before. It's called Clear.
Go clear.
Yeah, and it comes in a concentrate, and you probably have to buy it in a large, this is a 10 liter, and then it gets diluted.
Okay.
And it is quick. Like, it's pretty amazing. Very good for gravel pathways, anywhere you're going to get some annual weed germination and you just want to wipe it out. That is like perfect. Of course, it's non-selective, right? So it'll kill anything it touches. So you want to be careful, or I shouldn't say
I
kill.
guess
It burns.
yeah, that's where, I actually kind of have the benefit of having that 3-foot step up from my neighbor's yard where I can walk along their fence line and I'd be able to spray along their fence line down low.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure it doesn't touch any of my stuff
Yeah,
that's 3 feet higher.
there you go. Now, my experience with Clear on Morning Glory doesn't work too well. So the only way it would work is pulling and getting some solution on that open stem.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
this
and
is,
I can do that. That's not a problem. I just go in there and clip all the stuff that's starting to climb the chain link fence and
mm-hmm. And it's, it's again one of the tougher, but you know what's even harder is if you're in, say, a damp area and you have a horsetail, right? Like, it's not going to
up and
happen.
move.
I had a client we designed a landscape for. They did their phase 1 of their landscape, which was regenerating a cut slope. So they stabilized the slope. They wanted to do the bottom portion, and it's full of horsetail. And it's like, you're going to have to embrace the horsetail because it'll never go. But they didn't like that. So they think they can get rid of it. No, I've never seen it be eliminated. But the Morning Glory you can. It's so you're not in the worst case scenario. So that's a good thing.
There's a little light at the end of that tunnel.
Yes, there is. Yeah, you try that approach, and
All right.
and even in your veggie garden, I wouldn't put any fabric down. I would just put your whatever mulching material you want to use, whether it's hay or straw or whatever, probably straw. And then you could just shift that away if you needed to pry up anything, and just be super aggressive when you see something, and just make time. Say a Monday night, I go out and I'm going to go after this, right? And you will find you get some headway on it.
Oh, that's scary. Not
Oh, it
putting any
isn't.
blocker down, I know.
It's an amazing plant. Well, the fabric, I've fabriced areas here. We have different strategies with. So here's an interesting one. We do the exact opposite of what you're told. All of our invasive perennials, let's say Morning Glory, that we remove, we compost it. Right. So we used to thermophilically compost it. So we'd have a hot compost, and it absolutely killed it. No question. Now we do it passively. So there's no heat and it's unmanaged. But what we do is we do windrows, and then we have a 10-foot wide piece of fabric, the type of fabric you would see at a nursery center on the ground where they put pots on them. It's quite thick, but it allows water and air through, but it doesn't allow light, and it doesn't allow anything coming up through it. And that it goes over the windrow, and that prevents any growth. So light suppression works, but it has to be, you have to get it in its entirety. So like where you are, if you fabriced all this area and your neighbors is still open, well, it won't fully do the job. So yeah, there's light suppression's great when you can do it. because it's you're not having to do too much. You're just allowing time to go to tick away, and you're not doing too much in the way of soil disruption either. So, because no amount of disturbance seems to help. Another thing with morning glory is compaction. It loves compaction. So that's another signal that you've got some compaction somewhere. Not always the case, but
I say maybe way down low.
Mm,
But as far as like in the planting beds, garden area, like it's really fluffy soil.
cool. So it gets,
All right, well, thank you so much for your help. I will
no
check some of
problem.
those things out.
Oh, I was also gonna say another thing you might do. You might talk to your neighbors and see if they would also be interested in getting rid of it. Because, like, I don't know, I would also want to get rid of the morning glory.
Yeah, they're
And
renters. They don't really care.
Yeah.
well, do you know? I mean, have you asked them? Like,
Yeah, they don't care.
maybe
I
to
mean, she
another landlord or something. I don't know. I was
she's
thinking
even
maybe you
worse.
could do like, comfrey and then like some trees or something, because like then you could actually shade it out. And I mean, obviously it won't be gone, but like I'll have a lot harder time establishing itself. I don't know. I mean, like cooperating with the folks around you is like,
I would absolutely love it if I had neighbors that were more involved with that kind of stuff, but they've been nice enough to give me access to that side of the yard so I can go over there and pull stuff down off the fence. But I live in Tacoma, Washington. It's people are kind of like they just do their own thing. We're
Mm,
ready to get out of here.
yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Well,
but yeah.
we have a couple minutes left. Jade, did you have any questions at all while we got a few moments left? I don't want to
Yeah, I don't want to
leave
take
you out
up
of the mix.
maybe too much time, but I've been really curious about how to integrate, not how to integrate, but we've got a really heavy livestock load here. It was our mistake. We filled it really quick, and we've got a lot of equines, a lot of goats, a lot of sheep, a lot of pigs. So one of the things that I've been working on really hard this year is creating a pasture. And everything in permaculture seems to completely headbutt with like a monoculture of pasture. And so this year I've been doing, some really deep rooted orchard grass, everything that's healthy for forage, but it just all still feels like grass. And I'm just really curious how, I know you've been taking that farm course. How do they think about pasture in a permaculture lens without feeling like you're wasting valuable, like medicinal food space or canopy? We're planting trees for canopy, but it just still feels like a big bare patch of grass, like
Right.
lawn.
Well, I would say probably the most exciting thing I've seen in farm design is agroforestry, right? Let me just I'll bring up an image here, and that almost follows keyline design. Here, I'll just share screen here. All right. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, where this could be a pasture. And in this case, what they've done, it's really not super clear in this diagram, but there are rows of trees. Okay, so, and those could be fodder, they could be, you name it. They could be for forestry, they could be edible, so they could be fruit or nut trees. There's a wide range of potential there. And with keyline design, unlike, I'll have to go back here. There's a good example. You'll notice that the spacing between these rows is the same here as it is here, right? So this is part of keyline patterning. This is from this actually is something you might want to dive into, is Ridgedale Permaculture. I don't know if you've watched any of their content on YouTube, but that's just Richard Perkins. He's a small farmer in, like it's 10 hectare in Sweden on the 59th parallel, so quite far north. And you'll see all these are even, right?
Yeah.
And what he's done here, this is, fairly soon after planting, but these are all filled with nut and fruit trees and shrubs. And then he runs his animals in the alleys. So what they have found is that when you introduce trees into a system like this, you now have, it's easier to rotationally graze, right? So you have an alley there, you have some temporary fencing, at least you'd have to definitely, or some protection you'd have to provide there. But the alleys between the trees, you could do, you could set it up for grazing like you were talking about. You could run annual crops in there. There's this huge potential for this space. And they found that with the tree crops on a keyline pattern like this, not only do you get the yield off of these trees, but it increases the pasture production significantly, even with shade. So you would say, oh no, I don't want to shade that out.
Right.
Well, you space the trees for equipment usage. If you're having to maintain with a flail mower or your haying or whatever, you gear the spacing not only for the trees but for your equipment to run in there. And I've seen a lot of people doing this on the agrarian workplace. That's something you might want to check out after this course too. That is an amazing resource. So if you go to regrarians.org, it is.
I know you brought that one up a few weeks ago, but when I went to try to look into it, it felt like there wasn't a lot of info on their website, and I couldn't find a place to sign up for a class or anything. So I was a little
you'd have to.
Is it a subscription?
That's right. It's and I think there's 3 or 4 different types. So if you wanted to take the farm training, right, you would have to take you'd have to be what they call a planner member.
Okay.
So that's what I've been doing there for the last year and a half. And I pay a monthly fee, and I take 2 of their training sessions, online training courses, twice a year. I don't tend to be able to get through all of them. Like there's 2 sessions each week, but you can go in at a very, I don't know the name of all the different levels, but I know there's some in there. They're very minimal monthly fee, and you get access to quite a bit of the site. So what it is it's a hub of other farmers around the world. It's in a Facebook-like format, a Facebook-like platform, because it's run by them. It's called The Workplace. And then depending on your subscription, depends on all the available different groups that you could look at. And people post stuff there, and they, like yourself, that you'd post a question, and then, there's literally thousands of different members, some more active than others. But that's a very interesting place to start.
Well, I'll check it out. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and check out like Joel Salatin, Richard Perkins. They are both running animals on pasture, and they have both created really diverse pastures. So if they're very careful with the pressure on the area. so that that area is resting before it gets another before it gets any activity on it. And I think that may be one of the challenges you would have, is the areas being able to rest between grazing.
Yeah, I solved that challenge this year. We built dry lots last year, sacrifice pens, and right now my pasture grass is 16 inches tall. So I'm doing great with taking care of it. It just feels not, I don't want to say it doesn't feel like permaculture, but it just doesn't feel, there's a lot of inputs, I guess.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you having to reseed each year or do anything like that, or?
No, I seeded one pasture this year just because we were still working on the dry lots, and so the horses were beating the crap out of that this winter. But our bigger pasture, our big, hot, warm, sunny microclimate pasture is thriving.
Great.
So
Great.
dialing it in.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the diversity comes with the diversity of animals too.
Yeah.
And I know like Joel Salatin and Richard Perkins, they would run, let's say they would run some cows through an area and then follow up with chickens. And I know Richard Perkins had both layers and meat birds. And he had an interesting approach where the chickens themselves had a huge positive impact on the land. But again, they were being moved across the land on a daily basis, and they wouldn't be returning until that area had fully recovered.
Yeah.
But every time they went back, it would, because there was this big disturbance, it then gave opportunity to go away from that monoculture. You're now going to get a little bit more diversity of regrowth, right? And I think that's part of it, is just having this huge diversity of plants. So when you pull back your pasture grass, what's growing below it?
Yeah.
You know, and I have a friend with 25 acres, and he has an equestrian center, 35 horses, and it's just, you know, you can't do it. You completely obliterate an area, and then, you know, relying on the inputs of straw for the rest of the year. But or hay, sorry, mixing those up. But no, I would, for your situation, I would check out Keyline Design, and that's a really deep subject all in itself.
Okay.
Right. But I love seeing trees and alleyways and animals running in between those. For me, that's just this incredible combination of diversity and some great yields too down the road. But I think some people get pretty scared about that whole concept, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't bode well with a lot of agricultural folk, but worth looking at. So
thank you.
Yeah, and we've gone over a little bit here.
I don't know. Sorry, I had a podcast recommendation too. Because I don't know. I was listening to this podcast a little while ago, and like I don't have enough acreage to do it, but also, they talk about like tons of silvopasture concepts, and like I know in one of these like episodes they did it in the fall, so like October, November-ish, December-ish. In that time period, they were talking about like how to reseed different grasses and how to like the guy grazes goats. So I don't know, that might be applicable. Yeah, okay, sweet, cool, that's great. Anyways.
Right on. Well, we're just past 10 here. I should run. I've got a mountain of stuff to do today and the rest of the week, but hopefully everybody's had their question answered. How about you, Ralph? You dropped in towards the end here, or do you have any questions you wanted to have answered today, or?
I must have gotten the time wrong.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, okay. I have a question that hopefully is quick.
Okay.
It's got to do with a tree that I have on my property.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully I can show the picture. I don't know if it's gonna come out. Let's see.
Yeah,
Can you
Well,
see?
I see a picture, but I'm not sure about
Well,
multi-stem tree. Yeah.
yeah, it's a Palo Verde, and it's growing next to this garage building,
Mm,
and it's bending over like pretty far.
mm.
And at first we thought it was growing toward the sun, but let's see if you can see. Can you see how far it's bending? I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking it looks like it's bending away from that building and not toward the sun, because it's almost like it's gonna fall over. And we even we tied strings to it to try to straighten it out. And as soon as it gets past the string that's holding it, it bends away. Any theories why that could be happening?
Any theories as to why?
Yeah.
Well, trees can lean over for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it could be a wind tunnel going through there and it gets pushed. It could be that it was planted in fairly shallow ground, and it could be quite compacted, so it's not able to deeply root itself. With trees, it's quite funny. In tree farms, when you get a caliper sized tree, so you get something, decent at a nursery, it's potential that the finished grade that you're seeing in the nursery, it actually may be about, 6 or 8 inches below where it started. So in other words, it's been buried. Every time it's been handled by somebody and replanted, it goes deeper, 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 and that can cause some huge issues. But very hard to say, Ralph, without, even if I was on the site, you might not know.
Yeah.
If you want to try and stake it and save it, what I would do is look for the best way of staking any tree, in my opinion, is using, I'm trying to remember the product. I think it's called duckbill. Anyways, it's basically 3 cables that come off the tree at about, depending on the size of the tree, that could be a 3, 4, or 5 foot elevation, and you run 3 different lines down to stakes, and you don't tension up any of them, and they're firm, but they're not, you're not trying to force anything, and that way the tree gets to move around. It's kind of like having a cast on your arm and then taking it off after months, and it's like, oh gosh, you've lost all your muscle, or a lot of the muscle for that arm. Whereas this type of staking, it allows the tree to keep moving around, and it doesn't weaken it. But usually when something starts to go over that much, it can be tough to reverse it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't imagine there's much we can do about it at this point. Yeah, I was just curious, for the future, trying to prevent that. But the wind theory looks like it could be that, because it's in an area that maybe some wind blows there.
Yeah, I've seen it happen with even where I live, say wind and wet snow, right? So you can have a tree happy one day, fairly newly planted, and if you get a wind and wet snow event, so there's lots of drag, it can take over stuff. So, and it's more disheartening when it's an older tree, because then you're handcuffed as to how you can fix that. But
yeah, this one's been there for a while, so and it's not, I don't think it's falling over, it's really growing crooked that way.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, but anyway, Yeah, I know you have to go. I don't want to hold
Yeah.
you guys any
I
longer.
got.
Sorry, I got the somehow I got the time an hour off.
Oh well.
All right.
Well, and yeah, it's usually 9 a.m. That's my time, anyways. All instructors have different times they log in, but we're at 9.
All right. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. I hope it was informative, and have a great rest of your week. We look forward to seeing your assignments next Monday.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Oh,
Yeah.
take care.